a moment of silence and sanctions. Canada marks the 2-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Parents start planning for Monday. Extracurriculars and lunchtime supervision are out as teachers take job action. Plus, from low cost to no cost, Regina travelers lose another cheap flight option before it even takes off.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It's Friday, February 23rd. CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Natasha Lipney. Tomorrow is the 2-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the Saskatchewan government held a special ceremony to show solidarity with Ukraine.
We feel shock, we feel horror, we feel upset, we feel fear that the war continues. It's emotional, it's difficult, but we have hope.
People gathered at the legislature to light candles, say prayers, and hold a moment of silence. Saskatchewan has welcomed more than 6,000 displaced Ukrainians since the war began. One of those is Olga Kolas. She and her family moved to Saskatchewan at the end of 2022. And while starting new life hasn't been easy, she appreciates the support.
Started our lives here, so as I said, I have a master's degree in journalism. I started here of being a server, like from the very beginning, and I was even overqualified for this job, and they didn't want to hire me. And I said, like, you know, I am a newcomer, I have 3 kids, and they won't eat my diploma. So I just need job, I just need money for live. We established our lives here, and we're really happy to call Regina our home.
Saskatchewan has also provided millions of dollars in aid to Ukraine since the war began. The Canadian government, meanwhile, is showing its support for Ukraine by toughening sanctions against Russia. 10 people and 153 entities have been targeted. The move is part of a joint effort with the United Kingdom and the United States. Benji Heyer has more.
Well, the administration here calls this sanctions package major, massive, crushing. It's the biggest tranche since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago. President Biden saying the US and Western partners must ensure that Russia and its President Vladimir Putin, quote, pay the price for death and destruction.
And Putin believed he could easily bend the will and break the resolve of the free people of Ukraine. That he could roll into Ukraine and he would roll over them. 2 years later, he remains wrong.
The vast majority of these measures designed to impede Russia's war effort further, impose restrictions to close existing gaps in the sanctions regime that Russia's been able to evade so far. That could well mean penalising other countries or entities that are exporting equipment to Russia or those that are still funding its major energy sector. And these sanctions also target the state-owned operator of Russia's main payment system, as well as private companies involved in Russia's defense industry. The idea is to hit Russia's economy hard, but this is an economy that's already the most sanctioned in the world, and in spite of that, it remains larger than it did before the invasion in February 2022. Included in these sanctions also a set targeting individuals connected to Alexei Navalny's imprisonment and death last week. These, the White House says, will help ensure Putin pays an even steeper price for his aggression abroad in regard to Ukraine and repression at home in relation to the treatment of Putin critics like Alexei Navalny. Both of these exemplifying what the US State Department calls Putin's brazen disregard for human life. And essentially, Biden's overarching message to the US, to the world, is that history is watching, that the failure to support Ukraine, to stand up to freedom, he says, will not be forgotten. In accordance with that, he today urged lawmakers stateside to pass a bill that stalled in Congress, but if it's approved, would provide tens of billions of dollars worth of aid to the war-torn nation. Benji Heyer for CBC News, Washington.
We also spoke with a Saskatoon woman today who has been working with the Canadian Red Cross in Ukraine. Angela Hill says taking cover in a bomb shelter has become part of her routine. It reminds her every day about how dangerous this war still is. She spoke to us from Kyiv.
For the most part, you sort of wake up feeling like you're in any other big city. There's people going to work, getting about daily life. And then there's that reminder when the air raid alert goes off. So there's public loudspeakers. Almost everybody has an app on their phone. And it's this sharp reminder that not all is well, not everything is safe all the time. It's a reminder to seek shelter. In some cities, the public shelters are in metro stations, so you go way underground. Or in others, in places like Dnipro, where I was earlier this week, it's there's these concrete blocks that are public shelters on street corners where you can go in and seek safety in case something should happen. You never know. That's the part that I think is difficult for people here, is you don't know when that siren's going to go off. Maybe it's 6 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And so there's sort of that, and sometimes it won't happen for days in a place like Kyiv or in the West. In places in the East, it could happen 6 times a day or 7 times a day. And so it's that waiting, I think, that is more difficult than when it happens, because when it happens, okay, you know what your response is, you know what to do next. So the first had the opportunity to travel through eastern Ukraine, so in Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Dnipro. These are areas where a lot of displaced individuals have come to stay. There are also areas where we often hear alerts. There's ongoing, destruction and devastation that has been happening. There's always this moment of, you're from Saskatchewan? And it's really interesting because sometimes when you travel, people don't know Saskatchewan. You kind of describe it as being between Vancouver and Ontario, or between Vancouver and Toronto. But across Ukraine, they go, oh, Saskatchewan, like, of course. And they're really appreciative of the support of people from across Canada through Red Cross. Lost loved ones, they've lost homes, they've had so much loss and difficulty in their life. And so, it really is, my heart breaks for them. And they're so strong, but it's just an ongoing difficult situation.
The Saskatchewan Teachers Federation has served notice of another round of job action on Monday. They're trying something new with the hopes it will get the government back to the negotiating table with a different offer. Alexander Kwan brings us the details.
Starting Monday morning, Saskatchewan teachers will refuse to participate in extracurricular activities for 24 hours. That means sports, drama, music, band, clubs, and even planning for graduation celebrations are off the table. Teachers will also withdraw lunchtime supervision in Saskatoon and in and around Moose Jaw, Lloydminster, North Battleford, and the North. The president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation says job action is an attempt to get the province back to the bargaining table.
This government has the ability to pay. They have the ability to ensure that students are getting the supports that they need in classrooms all across the province. And they just need the political will. And a lot of that political will often comes from public pressure.
During a news conference on Friday, Samantha Beacott confirmed that negotiations with the province are at a standstill. The latest round of talks collapsed last week, and it's not clear when or if they will resume. Beacott says the teachers are not interested in negotiating until negotiators from the province are given a new mandate to address class complexity and class size.
So we did communicate that to the GTBC, that until they have the authority to engage in negotiations around classroom complexity, that we would be declining their invitation.
One expert says the STF is trying to strike a balance with this job action between making its position clear and maintaining public support.
I think trying to find that balance is difficult, and we never know. We might end up to a point where there is a full-scale strike, because that is ultimately what will put ultimate pressure on the employer. But for now, I think they're trying to keep that balance.
The Ministry of Education has yet to share how it plans to address the impasse. It has said repeatedly it will not negotiate class complexity into the contract. In a statement, the ministry said it has invited the STF to the table every day this week. The STF says they're ready to negotiate if the province brings an offer that addresses their concerns. If not, even more job action could be on the way next week. Alexander Kwan, CBC News, Regina.
Also on Monday, another coroner's inquest will get underway related to the mass stabbing at James Smith Cree Nation and the village of Weldon in 2022. This one will examine how killer Miles Sanderson died. There was a 4-day manhunt for Sanderson, and he died shortly after police arrested him. Multiple sources told CBC News that Sanderson consumed pills just before his arrest, and a preliminary coroner's report suggests he didn't die from blunt force trauma. This inquest comes after a separate inquest last month into the stabbings themselves. The chief coroner says that was different from analyzing Sanderson's death.
I can only have an inquest if it's from one occurrence. So we could say that James Smith Weldon was, within a very short time period, was really one occurrence that linked all together. His death is completely different. It happened 3 days later. His death is completely different compared to what happened to James Smith.
This latest inquest in Saskatoon will look at what happened after Sanderson left James Smith Cree Nation and focus on his death rather than the manhunt. It is scheduled to run until Friday. And a First Nation in northern Saskatchewan has hired one of the province's top cops to get a handle on rising violence. The Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation declared a state of emergency in October because of a spike in drugs, guns, and gangs. It has appointed retired Saskatoon Police Chief Troy Cooper as its new community safety lead. Cooper is Indigenous, grew up in the north, and on top of being Saskatoon's former police chief, he also served in Prince Albert.
It's simple. With over 30 years in his field, he's seen it all. His experience in tackling drugs, gangs, and violence, exactly what we need to navigate our community towards a safer future.
First of all, I guess just learning about the community needs and the current state. So we've just come through a state of a local emergency. And so the first thing we have to do is address that, make sure people are safe and that they feel safe.
Cooper says the long-term strategy will include using tools like Indigenous community safety planning. This week, scientists observed 3 large solar flares. Those are bursts of radiation from the sun. The one yesterday was the largest since 2017. Solar flares can disrupt radio communications and power grids. They also cause the northern lights, but only when accompanied by slower waves of magnetic energy. And that didn't happen this time. The number of solar flares rises and falls in an 11-year cycle. The peak is on its way in a few months. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. Regina's airport is one of many across the country affected by Lynx Air ceasing operations. The airline was set to offer flights to Toronto and Vancouver for as low as $79 starting in June.
It's quite a blow to many of us in industry, as this was very unexpected. Lynx has been making a number of announcements in Canada, including most recently, I think they had their first plane land in Mexico just a few days ago. So they've been going gangbusters with growth, but the reality is they've now filed for creditor protection. This is a real shame, especially for those employees who are working at Lynx that are about to lose their jobs.
Last night, the Calgary-based company said it was ceasing operations come Monday. Nisha Patel has more.
After just 2 years in business, Lynx Air is grounded. With little warning, the airline is shutting down this weekend, putting hundreds of pilots and flight attendants out of work. Lynx says customers with flights booked should ask their credit card companies for refunds, but those holding vouchers are out of luck. Competitors Flair Airlines and WestJet are offering some discounted fares for stranded passengers. The disruption to travelers comes just ahead of the busy March break travel period.
Frustrating,
for me it was, yes.
Dejected. It was very chaotic to find our luggage and then sort of, communicate through all the staff members. None of them were aware. I mean, I wouldn't blame them, even they were not aware of this decision.
They actually had us by the runway ready to take off. And then all of a sudden he shuts down and says, "I'm sorry, I will have to take you back to the terminal. The flight has been canceled."
Flair and Lynx were definitely our go-tos, and not having Lynx available is definitely a big deal.
The company blamed inflation and fuel costs, too much regulation and competition. Lynx was an ultra-low-cost airline. Customers paid lower base fares, but extra fees to choose seats and check bags. The model is successful elsewhere, But experts say here, high airport fees restrict carriers like Lynx from offering much of a discount compared to major players like WestJet and Air Canada.
So all they're doing is they're fighting against the existing incumbent carriers for the exact same customers with higher fares than what you would expect ultra-low-cost carriers to charge.
Just last month, Lynx was launching new routes and seemed to be offering Canadian travelers more options.
What you're going to end up seeing is more limited service. So instead of having the choice of airline, you may have one or 1.5 airlines depending on the time of year, and that will ultimately result in higher fares.
Lynx is the latest airline to run out of runway. Over the past 2 decades, Jetsgo, CanJet, and Swoop, among others, have all failed to take off. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
The weather update is brought to you by Capital Ford Lincoln. Trade and upgrade is on now.
Tyreek Reed joins us now with a look at our forecast. So typically people would be clamoring to jump on any flight they could to escape Saskatchewan in February, but the weather hasn't given us much to complain about this year.
Exactly, Natasha. I mean, who would want to leave with this beautiful weather we've been seeing? Still above seasonal throughout most of the province. We're currently sitting at 8 degrees in Buffalo Narrows, actually 7 there, but as we head further down south, we're also seeing temperatures above seasonal as well in Maple Creek. Now, as we head into Regina and much of central and southern Saskatchewan, we are seeing temperatures above 0 as well right now. We're currently at 1 degrees in Regina. In Saskatoon, we're sitting at 0, so still very warm. Now, I know we're getting used to these warmer temperatures, but we do have some winter weather coming through this weekend. Environment Canada did issue a special weather statement for much of central and southern Saskatchewan, including here in Regina and Saskatoon. Now, that's going to bring with it lots of snow, rainfall, and heavy winds as we head into Sunday. So that won't be a problem with us that won't be a problem right now, but as we head into Sunday night, that will definitely start to pick up. We'll see that snowfall in areas like Saskatoon. Here in Regina, we won't have to worry about that too much, but we will see that rainfall. As we head into Monday, we'll probably be left with about 20 centimeters of snow in places like Saskatoon and Humboldt. Once again, this won't be a problem for southern areas like here in Regina, but we will see that rainfall, much of which will be freezing rain. So we'll see between 1 to 3 millimeters of rainfall as we head into Monday as well. Now, we have been dealing with a lot of that wind today. As we head into Saturday, that will pick up some more. We'll see gusts between 40 to 50 kilometers an hour. That will begin to calm down a bit heading into Sunday, but as we head closer to that system that's moving through, we'll see that start to pick up a lot more. Now let's take a look at our 7-day forecast here in Regina. We will be seeing temperatures above 0 once again on Saturday, seeing a daytime high of 3 degrees. Of course, we want to keep an eye out for those northwesterly winds gusting to about 50 kilometers an hour. On Sunday, we'll see that temperature warm up a bit. We'll see it at around 1 degrees for a daytime high. Heading into Monday, of course, keep an eye out for that rainfall. And on Tuesday, we'll also see that cold coming through. We'll see a daytime high of -14. And for Saskatoon, a bit of a similar picture as well. We'll be sitting at around -1 on Saturday. On Sunday, we'll also be seeing that -1 as well for a daytime high. And heading into the week ahead, a daytime high of -18 degrees for Saskatoon. So that cold is definitely going to hit that area as well, Natasha. But for now, it's still pretty warm. You can go out and enjoy your weekend, but we will want to keep an eye out for that winter storm that's heading through.
Certainly. That has me rethinking maybe my strategy about going up to Saskatoon this weekend, so thank you for that.
No problem, Natasha.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break. The Liberals and the NDP have reached a deal on Pharmacare. The federal government will cover the cost of birth control and diabetes medication. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh spoke to the CBC about the deal, which is central to the Supply and Confidence Pact between the two parties.
We've secured something really important, I'd say really historic for Canadians. We're really excited about this. We have legislation that clearly points to single payer. It references the Canada Health Act and the principles of the Canada Health Act, very much what we needed to get, so that's secured. In addition, we have a commitment to cover 2 classes of drugs in a single payer model. So proof of concept, we're actually delivering. This is well and above what we had in our agreement. So this is something that's going to make a big difference in the lives of Canadians. The 2 classes of medication that are covered, contraceptives as well as diabetes medication.
This week, the Fifth Estate tackles the ongoing issue of the cost of food. It will examine the idea of a code regulating dealings between grocers and suppliers, and why suppliers say that's necessary. Here's a preview from the Fifth Estate, Stephen D'Souza.
Consumers are clearly upset with the high cost of food, but many companies that make the products on these shelves say they're feeling the squeeze too.
There's very few, if any, people in the supply chain who are willing to actually speak out against the practices with retailers for fear of some form of negative reaction or retribution.
What's the worst case scenario?
Complete removal from store shelves.
That's why we're concealing the supplier's identity. They manufacture a snack sold at a major grocer. The supplier says grocers charge them for everything, from placing products on store shelves to delivery and packaging problems, a system called chargebacks.
They tend to often seem like they're made up to pad sometimes their profits.
The supplier says a big grocer once raised the price of their product by $2, money that wouldn't come back to them.
Definitely upset because it wouldn't sell at that price. And if it doesn't sell, like I said, I'm liable. It would hurt me in my business.
The proposed grocery code of conduct is meant to address this, to bring fairness and transparency between suppliers and the big grocers.
We just need to sign a code that doesn't increase the risk of higher food prices to Canadians.
Loblaw has warned a code could lead to empty shelves and could potentially add over $1 billion in cost for consumers.
We had a few scare stories like that in the UK, and none of it actually came into effect.
Christine Taken oversaw compliance for the UK's version of the grocery code. She says the code helped eliminate many of the extra charges grocers imposed on suppliers.
One of the retailers said they found out they had 30 different ways of charging suppliers for things, and then by the time they'd finished looking at all the issues that I was raising, they'd got down to 3.
So far, Metro and Empire, which own Sobeys, are in favor of the code. And while the code isn't meant to directly lower prices, that did end up happening in the UK. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
Who's Minding the Store airs tonight on the Fifth Estate at 9 p.m. on CBC and CBC Gem, or you can catch it on YouTube. And Tyreek is back with another look at our forecast as we head into the weekend.
Thank you, Natasha. Temperatures will drop to around -1 tonight in Regina. As we head into tomorrow morning, we'll still feel those cool temperatures, but still warm, sitting at around 0 degrees with a wind chill of -6. Heading into the afternoon, that will warm up. We'll get above 0. We'll see a daytime high of around 3 degrees. In Saskatoon, we're looking at around the same situation. Tonight will be pretty cool, sitting at around -4 with the wind chill of -9. Heading into tomorrow morning in Saskatoon, that will warm up a bit, sitting at around -1. And heading into the afternoon, of course, that will warm up a lot more, sitting at around -1 with the daytime high of around 4 degrees as well. Natasha?
Thanks for that, Tyreek, and a happy weekend to you.
Happy weekend to you too as well.
Thank you. Well, that's it for us tonight. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/sask or check us out on YouTube. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend.